Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, where this episode I'm delighted to welcome Olivia Leong from Verra Asia to join us and to have a chat. Welcome, Olivia, and thanks very much for coming on the show.
Hi, Charles. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to talk to you. So Olivia had a almost 25-year corporate career, a large portion of which was in payments and specifically Amex and at Visa, two of the biggest corporate titans there are. And then she jumped ship in order to set up Verra Asia. I'm always interested on this podcast. You know, the first question I always ask is, what was the motivation? What was the reason that one day you were sitting there in an incredibly successful and exciting corporate career, and you went, you know what, I'm going to leave this behind and go and do something completely and utterly different. So, what was your thinking at that kind of critical moment?
Yeah, when in my last few years at Visa, I had the opportunity to build a team called B2B Partnerships. And this is about interacting, endorsing and supporting the fintech community that was bubbling up in Singapore and across Asia Pacific. And I had the opportunity to meet with some really inspiring founders. And through their stories, it got me thinking about the possibility of me being an entrepreneur, something that I've never entertained in all my years in
Okay.
corporate. I've always been, I try my best to be a good corporate citizen, represent the brand in the most, best way possible. And when I started talking to them and hearing their stories, I was really inspired by a number of them they're out there, created a solution that was solving for real problems. And I was like, I could do that too. Right. And obviously there's lots of problems around the world in the corporate world as well as, in your individual lives. And it's all about, understanding how can we find solutions, whether it's through collaboration to solve for these problems. So it took me about 2 years to think about this. I business modeled it out and tested the value proposition with people I know. And someone gave me a very good advice and said, you know what, people are going to tell you they love it,
Yeah.
because they're biased. They don't want to disappoint you. But one of my mentors actually said, why don't you go test it with someone that doesn't know you? So I reached out and said, hey, introduce me to someone that doesn't know me. And I did, and I presented my pitch to them, and it got validated. And so I decided to register the business Verra Asia, and it's about solving problems around B2B marketing and how the community that's supposed to be offering these marketing and consultancy services were not ready or didn't have the right competencies to support B2B businesses. And because I was sitting on the buyer side, working with a
Yeah.
number of large agencies, I knew what that meant, right? And so it's really about serving the underserved with businesses that are B2B focused. And the big push was when I spoke to some of the B2B founders I was working with, and they said, hey, look, we really enjoy working with you. You've helped us bridge our go-to market in your current capacity, but it only means that we can work with you when you're with the scheme. What about if you're working with other partners, right? And
Sure.
so this sort of gave me the idea to start the business. But I remember one advice that I got from one of my mentors was that don't start a business until you've secured your first customer. Don't start a business and look for the customer, right?
Yeah.
And so when I registered my business in February of 2018, I actually had the chance to invoice my first customer actually in March.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good.
And so yeah. So the other thing as well that gave me the courage to sort of venture out there was like, it's really about, you have a very limited amount of time left in your life, right?
Yes.
And I really wanted to push myself to an area where I was uncomfortable. I have to say that it will get quite comfortable after a while when you work in a corporate world. And I served my last corporate for more than 10 years. When I say comfortable, it doesn't mean that it's easy work, right? It's still challenging, but because you're so used to the routine that after a while, it may seem like you're not learning anymore, right? So being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur was something that I know that the corporate I was with couldn't offer. although we were encouraged to think as entrepreneurs, but it's different when it's your money, right? It's your money
Exactly.
that you're putting a
Ex-
bet on. Yeah,
That kind of
yeah.
brings me on to my
So
next
yeah.
question, because like
Hmm.
in a corporate, you've got all that visible and invisible support. You've got human resources, you've got financial resources, you've got technology resources, you've got this whole organization quietly supporting you in your day to day, a lot of which often you don't even realize when you've been there for quite some time. And then you're a founder, and there's you and a laptop and a desk, and that's it. So what were some of the biggest surprises? I mean, obviously you knew it was going to be different. You knew it was going to be challenging. That was part of your motivation. But what were some of the biggest surprises when you kind of like sort of suddenly started working by yourself, and all that corporate support that you'd probably got very, very so used to, you didn't even realize you were getting it towards the end. That suddenly all disappeared. What were some of the biggest surprises?
I think the how much I had to rely on technology, right? Across finance, HR, even managing my own marketing at the start, more than I thought I would. Because you would, like you said, when you stripped out of those cross-functional support as a founder, you feel really naked when you're out there, trying to, get this going on your own. Um, and I didn't realize that there was just so much out there at that time also for me. I mean, I know that there are some and names and brands that has been publicized, but then I also realized that there's actually a lot of technology that can help me build the business really quickly, and get to a level of productivity, even though it was a very lean team, right? I mean, I started the business with myself, and then maybe 2 days later there was another person with me. There's just two of us in the office. Yeah.
And how are you? I mean, like obviously, you said you tested the idea with friends and family, and as we all know, if you test it with friends and family, you're always going to get a positive because they're biased and they want to be nice to you and everything. And that's kind of one of the traps that some founders get into, going, but all my friends and family thought it was a great idea. But just coming back to friends and family, you've obviously had a really successful corporate career for 25 years. What were their thoughts when you said, you know what, I'm off to do something completely different? Were they supportive but slightly skeptical? Were they hugely supportive?
I definitely had mixed reactions. My siblings being really supportive because they also know me as a professional, right? Besides being their big sister, and they know how tenacious I can be. It's like, oh, if anyone's gonna do it, you're gonna be able to do it, um, which is very flattering, and I appreciate and I'm grateful for that. My mother was out of her mind when she heard I was going to leave the safety net of Visa to start out on my own. And she's like, "How are you going to pay yourself?" Because, right? How long is it going to last? Is this just a phase you're going through? And I think she was, as any mother would be, she's very protective. And but at the same time, as the business progressed, and she constantly, like every other month, she's going to check with me, have you paid yourself, have you paid yourself? So I think the concern around the financial aspect of me moving out from corporate and starting on my own is always a concern, because I have two boys to raise, and put them through college, which soon I will, and the financial responsibilities are there as well. From a friend's perspective, uh, again, there was a mixed bag of reaction as well. Those who have worked with me before and became friends, were very supportive in terms of, they know that I built the strategic business and financial acumen over time to be able to do this. And another group of friends were actually asking me, "Are you sure you want to bootstrap this? This is a lot of big financial commitment. Don't you want to go out there and look for investors?" And so, it got me, of course, considering all this feedback. But I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna bite the bullet and do it. And if it fails, there's always corporate to go back to.
Yeah,
But if I
exactly.
don't do it, I might regret it, knowing that I had the opportunity and I didn't go after it.
And what was I mean, so you just said there, like, oh, are you sure you want to bootstrap this rather than, go out and do the endless investors around and everything? Was it because you tested the you tested the value proposition and you were pretty confident it was going to work, or what were the reasons you're like, no, I'm just going to bootstrap this and go for it, and what was some of the thinking there?
Oh, the reality is that I didn't want like to have to manage investor relationships when I started the business. As I think for most founders out there that do have investors, there is a lot of care and attention that you need to place to ensure that you manage the shareholder value.
Yeah,
And at that stage when I started the business, while I had an original idea, you never know how it's going to evolve. And it has evolved over the last 7.5 years,
yeah,
right? And we're right now, I'm like literally at version 5 of Verra Asia. So, and it's also the business model itself as a professional services business may not lend itself to the typical lens of the VC investment appetite at that time. So do I want to spend the time, trying to convince VCs to invest in our business model, or do I want to invest in time building my client portfolio, taking care of our clients, nurturing the team as we were growing? So I think at the end of the day, I believe I made the right choice, right? Not bootstrapping it. And how we've evolved the business as well is that I treat the team members out as my partners, right? Vera Asia is a business where we revenue share, the what we make, and if there's extra, bonuses are handed out. So there's also accountability, not for myself, but also the team members as well to
yeah.
contribute to the business, right? Yeah.
Okay. And when just one last question on the kind of transition from corporate. So
Mm.
as you obviously move from the corporate world to the very, very different, single founder world, um, what were some of the lessons that you kind of like that transferred well? And on the flip side, what were some of the things which you thought would transfer well, but like it was all suddenly quite different, other than like, the technology that you were using and stuff? What were some of the things like, okay, that was really great skills I'm able to bring across, and this I need to relearn how to do this from a different perspective.
Hey, let me start with the what transferred well. I think one transferred well is, how in corporate, we are very process oriented, and and I always believe that if things don't work out well, it's either a process issue or a people issue. And so the processes that were set, well, at least I've been involved with and active participant of, or champion of, was certainly something that we brought into the business, especially when the business scaled, when we have to manage teams, and we want to make sure that there are SOPs in place, uh, frameworks in place to manage our client relationships, right? Because it's at the end of the day, Very Asia are our clients advocate. We are cheerleaders for our clients, but at the same time, it cannot be um, you know emotional about it. So the structure and the framework help us work in a very systematic way as a team. And so collaboration becomes a lot more seamless. I think that one of the things that I had to forcefully remind myself that this is not a corporate was when I set two bombastic goals for myself, like large numbers that I used to be, so in tune with. Suddenly had to go down to the tens of thousands versus the millions of dollar deals.
Yeah.
So it's like really switching your brain. I remember at that time, one of my first few employees actually said, don't you think you're setting too high a target for yourself? So you're giving yourself too much stress. So completely self-inflicted, right? And I'm like, I just sit back. It's like, yeah, I'm the boss. I can set my own targets. I can set what is right for the business. So there's a little bit of a reality check for me at that time. And so that was a switch for me as well. That took a while for me to adjust, like knowing that there's no more top down, right? I'm the
Yeah.
top. Yeah. So that was a mindset switch for me. Yeah.
And you talk about stress levels and everything, and obviously, corporate life, whilst there are many benefits, it can be incredibly stressful. It's very top down. You're dealing with really big numbers. You're dealing with huge targets and everything. But at the same time, when it's just you and you're at the top, and you live or die by the decisions you make, and it's all the good or bad, they're on you. That can bring a whole heap of stress and exhaustion that's often um, completely underestimated, as well as when you first go out, you get normally a huge amount of rejection of people going, no, that's not quite right, or no, that's not solving the problem. So how did you find that, and what are some of the strategies you had in place, like to kind of help you get over those humps and just power on through to to the success that you've achieved?
I think as a small business owner, and you know that as well, Charles, is that we always have to keep the pipeline flowing, right? In the consulting business, it doesn't mean you sign a customer, they're a customer for life. I mean, we do have customers that have been with us over the years, and I'm very grateful for them. But because the stress comes from knowing and acknowledging the fact that we have mouths to feed. We are
Yeah.
responsible and accountable to our teams. They're human beings that we need to respect, that they have families that they're responsible for. They have financial commitments, right? For themselves as well. And so definitely when we start the business and we're starting to build our brand and getting our brand out there in its initial days, we're a brand that no one knows, right? So there was a lot of pressure on sort of lying on my own personal brand reputation at that time when we started. And so if thankfully the network is big enough, and thankfully, through my champions in the network, they have been great referrers for the program. And even when they moved on to other roles or jobs, we had the chance to, at least present our value proposition, right, to them. But the stress around the financials is always top of mind for any founder, I'm sure. I mean, maybe sometimes we don't express it because we don't want our teams to feel, any instability, right, as we grow the
Yeah.
business. So we put on a brave front. But sometimes I feel like a duck, a swan, in the legs frailing sometimes, under the water. Um, and yeah, so managing that part is really around, creating like a really solid go-to-market strategy, ensuring that, you have multiple channels where you can continue to build the pipeline, not relying on one, not have a concentration risk. So we learn through that. I mean, that we didn't get it right. I mean, and I don't think that any business will get it right at the first go. It does take
No.
a lot of testing and learning, and you know that, right, Charles? Over the years you've run RFI, and finding that sweet spot, right, is important, but also understanding what your secret sauce is. So the stress also comes from, like, constantly understanding how do we compete in the most efficient way. And sometimes the stress come from making sure that we're hiring the right people that can embrace our culture, what we
Yeah.
value, right? And being very protective of it, right? It's constantly top of my mind. So even now, when we are, in fact, we are just putting 2 jobs out there right now. It's not about the roles and responsibilities. That's very straightforward. It's really about what are the personalities and the personas that we want to invite to participate in what we're doing and can embrace our values and our culture as we, deliver services to our clients.
I'll come back to people and culture in a bit because it's so important for a startup. And as you say, I think one of the hardest things for any founder is walking in the morning with that smile on your face. Even in your head, you're mentally juggling cash flow and financial requirements and trying to make sure the team's not looking at you in complete panic, going, "Are we okay here?" and trying to project an aura of calm and excitement to kind of get them going. But you talked about the fact, which is absolutely right, that I don't think any founder gets it right the first time. You kind of have an idea and then you sort of put that idea out there, and then it iterates and evolves, and you kind of poke around in corners, and you find, like, your version 1.0. So how, obviously, you said you tested it with a single client, and that was enough to get you going. And how was that process of then fine tuning that, of trying to identify that secret sauce that was, that became the engine of Vera Asia? How did you go about doing that?
Actually, this is something that I did. It's a transferable skill from my corporate days,
There you
especially
go.
with American Express. Okay. And this is where it's all about setting cadences and a discipline to review your relationship with the customer. And this is where we get the feedback. And it's also helped us evolve the set of solutions that we have. Because in the first engagement, it's always about the immediate needs, right? This is where you have the opportunity to really score big from a transactional level perspective with the clients, because they want something, you have to deliver. But during the whole process of engagement, in those cadences or those quarterly reviews, if you may, like one of the cadences are the quarterly reviews, is where it's the opportunity for us to really position ourselves proactively to the client, right? And really be asked to be at the seat of on the strategy table, right? And that's where we know that the customer has built that trust that moves that transactional relationship to a partnership relationship where they see you as a advisor and not just a consultant for hire. So that's a really important process for us as we started to if as and how we incorporated with the many conversations that we've started to have then evolve our solutions. So while we started off with performing maybe very tactical marketing and communication services because that's an immediate gap, but over time we were asked to to develop their marketing and comm strategy,
Yeah.
right? Managing their budgets. So for some clients, we even now do a zero-based budgeting for them. We know, what are the budgets that they have secured for the year, and trusting us with that because we have their business at the center of what we do. But then also looking at what are the other services that could support the customer with how they want to grow and scale, right? And so this is where we added capabilities like research solutions, which is and also working with research companies like RFI is an example where we could potentially collaborate as well, to build up more confidence because there's more data that we can assess and build up better value for customers. Yeah.
And you're talking about obviously, you've had pretty rapid growth. So I'm always interested, and I'll come on to people in a second, but culture is so important because culture is what, when you have very little branding other than your own personal branding, and you're starting to work with clients, and you're first starting to build a team. Culture is, your cultural DNA is what your team buy into. It's what your clients buy into. And I always think of culture as, it's kind of, you can either deliberately try and create a culture and go, this is what our values are and this is what we want our culture to be, or you can ignore it and one will happen anyway. So it's much better. It's much better for many reasons to have your own culture. So how conscious were you about sort of going, okay, this is what I want the brand and the values to represent, and this is the culture of how we're going to go about doing business and go about winning and delivering business. So what were some of the thoughts you had around that culture? And has it, as you said, you've gone from kind of Verra Asia 1.0 to 5.0. Has it changed and evolved over time, or is it very similar to what you initially thought? What's that cultural journey been like?
Charles, I believe that culture has to be the DNA of any brand. So even when I was branding Verra Asia, I don't know if I told you this, but actually Verra is an acronym for our values.
Oh, okay.
Yes. For V for value centricity, E for efficacy, R for respect, the next R for resourcefulness, and the A for advocacy. So to your question, has it evolved? No, we stuck with it. And I made sure that nobody forgets it as well because it is part of our name. Because I strongly believe that without these pillars that supports the conversations that we have and how we communicate to the customer, why we communicate to the customer, it's very easy to go astray as the business grows.
Yeah.
It is important to the brand because it guides the principle of how our business will grow is very much hinged on those values, and that will then shape our culture, right? So and that's why, like, with my my colleagues that have been with us over the last 7 years, you would see that they are continuously labeling and linking everything they do, whether it's a client facing engagement, whether it's an employee facing engagement or a partner facing engagement. These values are always top of mind, and we even build it into our performance management process.
Wow.
Right? These are like leadership behaviors that we expect from, well, when we invite them and into our franchise, we want them to know that this is what we value, right? And then if it's aligned, right? And I always say if the chakras are aligned, then we can build a successful career here at Verra Asia. And I'm sure that my colleagues can attest to that as well.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So
Because so many businesses, you're talking to them about their values and how do they remind the team about the values and how do they embed it in their working practices and in their
yeah,
thinking and
yes,
in
yes.
and it's in your name.
Yes, and even like the last letter A, advocacy, is not just for the clients, but it's also for ourselves. So we have this practice where we don't go to each other and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" Because it sort of victimizes you.
Yeah.
Rather, we change it to, "Hey, can I consult you on this?" And it
Okay.
completely changes the way that you think of yourself as somebody going asking for the consult, and the person who's providing the consult, um, how they see themselves is different, right? And then the respect is then very naturally built with each team member. And because you're doing it already with yourselves, it's then very easily and organically flown through how we interact with our clients and our partners. Um, and so, this is an example of how we see that working at Verra Asia. Mhm.
Okay, and just talking about working at Verra, as you said, you've got a couple of people you're looking for at the moment. You've obviously built the team very successfully. Something I think I ask every founder, and every founder finds equally challenging for a variety of different reasons, is firstly, sort of what sort of people are you looking for, and then secondly, how do you go about identifying them and bringing them on board? Because the first bit's challenging enough. The second bit can be incredibly challenging. So
Mm,
who are you looking for, and how do you go about inviting them into the Vera Asia brand and values?
mm. I will caveat before I respond that we've had our failures as well, right? When it came
Every
to
founder says
hiring,
the same thing.
right?
First up, can I just say I've never got this right all the time, where I've had some huge
Yeah,
mistakes. It's the
yeah.
standard caveat. But yes, I think we're all guilty of that because it's a learning process. But if
Yeah,
we
yeah.
if we ignore those for the moment, other than what you've learned from them, what are some of the lessons you've learned, and who do you look for?
Yeah, I think that part of the is building into the interview process. Oh, actually start with having the JDs really clear. But also for us, it's not just looking at, what experiences and skills they have, but also understanding their personalities as people. Because we are in the people business. And so it is very important that we understand some of the way that they operate, as a human being. So one thing that I always look for is some people with a curious mind, right? Like curious mindset is very important, and that lends itself to you being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
As well. And today, information is so easily accessible, that there's no excuse, right, to go out there and find out what you don't know. I always say that what you don't know will what you don't know kills you. So the opportunity for us is always going out there to seek out talent that naturally and authentically have a curious mind. The second part of it is personal accountability. That's so important, right? Because we have obligations, to ourselves, each other in the team, as well as to our clients and our partners, and we need to make sure that that sense of personal accountability is important, because that will then translate into team accountability, right? The third piece, which is really key, is that authenticity is really important, right? When you
Yeah.
show up, it's your true self, right? Because and if you want to win trust, it has to be your true self, and if there's no second guessing. I always say that, when I sometimes I walk out from an interview, and if I say things like, I can't put a finger on this person, right? That's when we know, okay, the authenticity criteria has not been met.
Okay.
So, and that comes through in the conversation. And part of the process is also like setting up your interview process, right? Right. I mean, we don't ask the, oh, what do you expect to see? Where do you expect to see yourself in 5 years' time? Right. We ask questions around how, as an individual, you deal with ambiguity. It doesn't matter whether it's in your professional work scene, or it's in your personal lives, in the relationships that you manage or have to are involved with. That ability to sort through ambiguity, right, is important, and that shows also the problem solving skills, right? That you're not going to be somebody that just identifies the problem, but also takes the time to gather the facts, take the time to synthesize it, and proactively provide recommendations to solve for those problems. It may not be, the perfect, solution. It doesn't have to be, but we want to make sure that people are thinking of this. So how do we do this in the interview process is for them to give us examples. The third piece that I always stress that is so important is do your reference checks. I know that it is time consuming,
Yeah.
But it's so important to do the reference checks. And sometimes the reference checks may not be just the referee that person provides. If you know which company that we worked with before, somebody will know somebody. In our network, it's so broad.
Yeah.
Somebody will know somebody. And you have every opportunity to investigate, find out in a legal and integrity way, right? To understand who you're bringing to franchise. If you're protective about, and I am very protective about the team,
Yeah.
right? The individuals and the mindsets that they have. And the last thing you want to do is, even though that someone is very qualified, they have the years of experience in the right companies that they work for, but if they're not the right fit for the team, it can throw such a bad spanner into it that it will just put us all in a spin. Yeah.
I think that's one of the most dangerous things, and I mean, we've all experienced it, but particularly as you start to grow and you start to have a bit more financial muscle when you're actually looking to employ people. When you're starting, you're so focused on personalities because and as you grow, you sometimes then err on the side of caution and get someone who's got the perfect CV with the perfect experience and sometimes forget the personality, and you might get someone who's very good at their job, but they don't have that innate curiosity, that desire to learn, that aptitude for finding a solution where it's really, really difficult, or the resilience that you need in the startup world. And
Mm,
and at that point,
mm,
all the experience in the world just kind of disappears. Like, it's focusing on those personality traits that's so important at the start.
yeah.
But I just want to go right. So if we go back to the kind of the start now, so if now 7.5 years later, as you say, you're on version 5.0, you've learned a huge amount, you've made lots of great decisions, and probably made a few that didn't quite work out. If you could go back and none of us would ever listen to ourselves in this hypothetical scenario, but if you could go back and tell yourself one thing that when you were starting that you wish you'd known now, or you know now that you wish you'd known then, what would be one thing or some advice you'd give yourself that you didn't know at the time when you were first making this fantastic transition?
Yeah, I would say to myself, think bigger.
Okay.
I think that when we first started, it was a very cautious move because I've never been an entrepreneur before. And so, perhaps, and I know for a fact that I could have made decisions that could have given us a little bit more of a hockey stick growth. Um, and because I was a bit more conservative, and I told myself, like, I reminded myself that, oh, I should be more conservative, I should watch my burn. And so that sort of didn't give us that uplift as fast as I would have liked. Um, but then, sometimes you never know. Then when COVID hit, COVID actually was unfortunate for the world, but it was actually the best years that we had because everyone was, especially with B2B marketing, there were no more events, people were not traveling, and some of the more traditional businesses didn't know how to do digital. And that's where, we focused our capabilities in building out the team and recruiting partners that could support digital marketing requirements for businesses. So again, uh, just closing out the response to your question is I could have thought bigger and
Okay.
and perhaps we would have invested in a different way. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting what you say
Yeah.
about COVID because I mean when I started RFI, which is obviously in banking, it was just at the start of the financial crisis, which shouldn't technically be a good time to start a financial business, but in a very similar way, it was very bad for banking. It was very bad economically for the world, but it was fantastic for us because it was that moment of change and disruption where there's opportunities for small players, to get that product market fit. But I
Mm,
just want to come back to we were talking at the start about resilience and about mental focus and overcoming the rejection and the exhaustion.
mm,
And it used to be 20 years ago that and you spoke to someone, particularly a founder, how's it going? Everything's great, everything's fine. I'm succeeding everywhere. There's nothing keeping me awake at night, and it was very much a show of force. And then in the last kind of 5 years, there's been a flip in the narrative where now it's all about vulnerability. Having being vulnerable and having a weakness has gone from being something you didn't admit to almost being a superpower in a kind of weird way, and probably needs to balance out a bit more actually, because I
mm,
do think it creates the thing that almost that founder tourism where people forget that actually it is going to be really, really hard work, and you are going to really, really need to knuckle down, and you can't just do that and then start sitting there going, well, I feel a bit mentally stressed and exhausted. But having said all that, are there some instances where opening up a bit and showing that vulnerability has either opened a door for you or strengthened your leadership or had like a really positive impact
Mm,
on the business as it was
mm,
growing?
I mean, it takes a village to raise a startup, right?
I like
And
that.
yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, we are human beings, and being vulnerable is a natural part of our being. And I feel like if you show up every day, being open to share your ups and downs, right? I think that's where you can gather the tribe together much closer, right? So yes, while we had the conversation around the financial stability of the company, it's really important and how our team members view it and how they would perform, and how it motivates them. At the same time, it is also the reality, when there are down cycles, the quiet periods, where, the you do get nervous. And that's where, I do share with the team that, look, pipeline's looking a bit dry, but let's think about how we can change that, right? And that has helped us come together as a tribe much closer as well. And I think that as a leader, once you open that up, you allow for more frequent feedback for sure. You also get a lot more honest conversations going on the table. Um, it's okay to also agree to disagree, right? And especially, and I also find that I have a really, really great group of Gen Zs in my team, right? And I found that through being vulnerable, they've had the chance to upward coach me,
Okay.
which I like. Yeah, which I really enjoy. And I think this is one part of like the corporate world that I don't get as much, maybe during that time when I was in corporate. But definitely the upward coaching has helped me work better with my colleagues, who some of them could even be my children, to be honest. Right. And I appreciate them for being so supportive. I'm really grateful that, they see my point of view, even though, and also like sometimes there's some generation gaps, that they're also willing to help me bridge as well. So I think also, and because of that ability to show that I can be vulnerable because I'm only human, that allow them to sort of put their guards down and be more open-minded about it. I mean, one of the things that we talk about as well is that whole diversity of mindset, right?
Yeah.
And as much as we are expected to understand how the Gen Zs or the Gen X operate, I think with at least I can speak for my colleague that I think they also have an appreciation for how my generation thinks as well. So
Yeah.
I think that also comes again, that whole I really believe that that's kind of like the superpower that we've built together as a team, which makes us more protective of it.
There's nothing more disconcerting as a founder, I think, than when you get your first CV and you're looking at their date of birth and you realize it was after one of your children was born, and you're now actually interviewing someone who's younger than your children. It's always a bit of an alarmist moment. I
Yeah.
remember it happened to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's also a wonderful opportunity. I mean, being a founder, that you have that chance to shape someone's career.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I'm really grateful for, is that opportunity and watching them blossom and grow as professionals, and building that grit, along the way as well. And we try to make sure that we expose them to as much as they want to be exposed to. So with some of my colleagues, at age 24, they're speaking to an MD,
Yeah.
right? And I remember her telling me, oh, I said, so how's the job going? She said, yeah, I'm really great. I really love it because, when I speak to my peers and they heard that I was presenting to an MD of a multinational, they were shocked. Said their
Yeah.
boss actually put you in front of him or her. Right. So I think that's something that we do very uniquely here. And I think because when you hire, right, you have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's like I said, it's a process, it's a journey, and we've learned a lot over the years. Yeah.
I think that's one of the great joys of being a founder, that ability to not just to be a leader, but to actually to lead others and help develop and grow them and watch them flourish one of the joyous moments. But Olivia, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for taking the time to join us and
you.
share your thoughts and stories and insights over such a fascinating journey for transitioning from 25-year corporate to a very successful bootstrapped startup. It was fascinating talking to you, and yeah, look forward to catching up again at some point in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charles, for having me.
Brilliant. For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.